Response is actually down this month, year over year, 13% in Aegis numbers, still up from 2 years ago. We kind of expected that, not that response would fall, but that we wouldn't be able to beat May and subsequent months because of the bump from COVID. The good news there is that average gift is up 20% on average. So we're still up 4% year over year, even over last year on the revenue side of things. So still good news, but we want to keep an eye on that response number to see if we can keep people coming into files. So I want to kick it over to Greg Fox, who is our Chief Strategy Officer, who's going to talk a little bit about the need for cultivation and new ways of talking with donors based on some new data that we've pulled and a case study.
Thank you, Nick. And I'll go through this quickly. You know, over the last decade, we've really been taking a hard look at the nonprofit fundraising environment and looking at where these greatest challenges are, and then look at what we've done to respond to them, but also what we might have sort of done along the way. So one thing that we have continued to see, lower acquisition response rates, and with that, higher cost of actually raising the money. And what that has created is boards and organizations reducing their investments in new donor acquisitions. So all of that really has created this problem that we are generating fewer new donors to offset the normal attrition that we get, shrinking donor groups. And there is a need for more optimized new donor strategy than ever before. So what did we do as the industry? So what we did is, number one, we looked at how many people are here. There's 137 million people here in the United States that are over the age of 45. So Nick, next one. So what we understand is that advancements in technology and analytics times the big data, the sort of the explosion of information really improved targeting, and really it created this growth of these nonprofit co-op databases. So what did that do? Well, it allowed us to continue to narrow in and to get slices and better and more targeted. And we really focused in on the most viable and high velocity donors. So technology data made it easier for us to target the people here on the left-hand side. So you've got 1 million people, that's estimated, that give to 11 different nonprofits. Another 7 million give to 6 to 10, another 17, 3 to 5. What's happened is that to manufacture response, we are prioritizing individuals who are high frequency givers and to give a lot of different organizations, not just one charity, but the entire industry as a whole. So what has that created? What problem has that created for us? So the next slide is that over-reliance on the targeting of the most responsive prospects have increased competition for the best prospects. We're saturating the market, and we're seeing declining donor satisfaction, which is impacting retention and reactivation. So what do we need to do about it? So new solutions like the More Simio audience are being far more effective for targeting new and under-solicited universes, while also improving targeting of these high volume audiences. So we're now able to just not focus in on these high volume people who are transactional, but now we're trying to build stronger case for givings in the other areas, while also focusing on the middle group here so that we can create a broader balanced portfolio of donors that we're acquiring. So what's that now mean to us? That means that we have to do a better job of cultivating. We have to do a better job of standing out. So this is one organization did, it's a rescue mission, and they wanted to understand what impact does a weekly gratitude phone call have on subsequent donor behavior? And is the incremental investment in the time and resources to do it worthwhile? So what they found is that new and active donors who received these thank you calls gave 50% and 30% more gifts over the next 12 months, respectively, than those who did not. They also found that donors who actually were participating in the cultivation calls retained at a much higher rates. Those who did not get a call, who were active donors, retained at 76%. Those who retained, 94% year-over-year retention. And of the new donors, less than 20% of those people who did not receive a call retained. Nearly 50% of those who did gave again. So it's a way of organizations to just continue to cement itself to create a stronger bond and more relevance. So overall, was it worthwhile? This organization found that there was a total increase of about $255,000, or about $50 per donor. And the gratitude phone call had an ROI of about 38-1. So it's an example of an organization creating and prioritizing the personal cultivation with these donors in order to offset some of the challenges that we're seeing in other areas. So back to you, Nick.
Question from Jessica about how quickly they made the calls. These were immediately after, I believe, within 24 or 48 hours, Greg?
Right. Yeah, I think they were. Yes.
Yeah. Any other questions on this or on the caging results from earlier? Okay. Thank you, Greg. Greg's going to be a more frequent guest host of these calls, occasionally doing all of them himself and then contributing segments some of the other times as well, because of his, as you can tell, deep knowledge of the industry. Looking at USPS postal rate increases, we have the Friday before Memorial Day weekend, the USPS announced their rate increases. And there's an old saying in politics, whenever you want something to get attention, you definitely launch it Friday before a long weekend. And so that's what they did, obviously, in being somewhat sarcastic there to try to get as little attention to this as possible, because these are enormous increases of 6.5 to 8.5%, depending on the type of mail that you're sending in the area that you're sending it to, because there are new surcharges that they're putting in place for volume. So this is in addition to, not in place of, the 1.5% rate increase that they had earlier this year. It's looking like they intend to do this year after year. So this will add up to be a 30 to 40% rate increase over the next 5 years, if it comes to pass. Now, if you're wondering, hey, I thought the USPS, because it's granted a monopoly, was only allowed to increase postal rates alongside inflation. You'd be right. This is not really legal. The Postal Accountability and Enhancement Act of 2006 said increases have to be tied to inflation. So the Alliance of Nonprofit Mailers, the Nonprofit Association Alliance, and others are challenging this in federal court as we speak. But that's not something that we can count on. So you'll hear a little bit of a call to action on this. The USPS will say this is necessary to meet their financial obligations. It's not. There's this so-called funding crisis in the USPS, but it's essentially a financial creation. That 2006 act that was passed USPS used to use a pay-as-you-go system like every other organization for their retiree benefits. The act required them to pre-fund their retiree benefits for over 60 years, as if every postal retiree was going to live to the ripe old age of 135. If they switched back to pay-as-you-go system for retiree healthcare and pensions, the funding crisis, and I'm using scare quotes there, would disappear immediately. So this is not a necessary increase. And then the USPS says that this will not harm mail volume. But if you're thinking about it, you have a cost to acquire threshold where it's profitable to acquire a donor. If your costs went up by a third, which it could do over 5 years, that threshold would move. You'd acquire fewer donors, you'd talk to fewer donors. It's simple math. That means that the USPS would have less revenue and the same costs, because the mail person has to go to all of the same houses, whether they have one letter or they have 5. So the price increase is counterproductive. They're not taking advantage of that volume for them. So What they're saying is our business strategy is to increase costs and lower services, which is very rarely a good business strategy. But for us, it means fewer donors at a time when we can ill afford to serve fewer people with fewer donors. So if you want to learn more about this, TNPA has a great postal policy update there. This is obviously the Cliff Notes version of that. So you're probably wondering what I'm wondered when I saw this, what can we do? Because we're not federal court judges that have the power to knock this down, we have to use more subtle persuasion. So you can personally email your reps at tnpa.org/postal_2021 and say, hey, we can't afford a postal increase. That's at the individual level. At the organization level, TNPA has a letter opposing the increase, and not surprisingly, senators and representatives do listen to big nonprofits, especially those headquartered in their states or with significant presences in their states, because we do have a decent amount of persuasion on these. So telling them that we oppose this increase. And then there are two bills going through Congress. And I know this term is being thrown around a lot, but they are actual bipartisan bills. There are 10 Republican and 10 Democratic co-sponsors on the Senate bill. And so they're talking about this is the best shot at postal reform, real reform, definitely since 2006 and possibly before that. So great opportunities there with those bills. What they do is they eliminate the requirement for pre-funding of employee health care. They say postal retirees can get Medicare, which there would be benefits over and above that were promised, but Medicare will cover a large portion of the healthcare there. And they'd be required to put weekly service data on the USPS website. Right now, that would look pretty sad. We had the worst month in December of mail delivery in recorded history, but second quarter was no shining gem, where only 78% of first-class mail was delivered on time, according to their postal standards. That was 92% last year in the teeth of the pandemic. So we want lower costs and better service, and the USPS wants to deliver the opposite of that.
Hey, Nick, one problem that this is causing, there are a lot of organizations whose fiscal year ends at the end of June. So,
Yes.
so they're definitely finding their May and June campaigns are coming in a lot slower this year than last year, which is, hurting their income in their current fiscal year. So, this is a real issue that these organizations are facing.
Yep. Throws off all of our response curves for projections. Things look like they're doing worse than they are. We saw it in December as well, where some organizations had to extend their what they would accept in, because postmark dates were before the end of the year, but they were still getting dribs and drabs in later because of late postal deliveries, either in home or back. And we're seeing that same sort of thing now. So while we talk about monthly, we'll look at the month by month results here. They can be thrown a little bit by slow delivery. Thankfully, as you saw, revenues up 4%. If that would likely be higher if delivery were a little faster, but still good to be up is better than down, as they say. Bit of an interesting study that came out on television viewing habits and our demographics there. The reason this came up is we were looking, another DRTV placement company said that they're going to optimize DRTV spots by network. And so we said, are networks really good predictors of the type of people who watch the networks? The Norman Lear Center did a study of ideology in television watching. And so they looked at kind of the political spectrum you're used to, blues more liberal, reds more conservative. It does correspond, although not quite neatly, to Republican versus Democrats, purple somewhere in the middle, and said, what do different demographic and political viewed people watch? And so they were able to go in and kind of type what people were watching and what was most popular in each demographic group. in this case by political ideology, but you can imagine there are also significant differences in other demographics as well. So looking at that network optimization, let's take ABC as an example. The favorite show among people on the red side of the spectrum is NCIS. Apparently, Naval Investigative Services corresponds somehow to a conservative ideology. Not entirely sure how, but it does. And then Modern Family and Scandal, also on ABC, were two of the 6 favorite shows in the blues category. And so and then America's Funniest Home Videos was one of 5 shows that had the same viewing habit across blues, purples, and reds. So you have one side, you have the other side, and you have shows that appeal to everyone. And really every network was like this. And so this idea of network optimization is kind of an interesting one. So I said one of 5 shows. You are probably wondering, as I did, what are the other shows? So Bones, Criminal Minds, Mythbusters, and Pawn Stars are the shows that we all agree on across the ideological spectrum. Now, the first 4 had actual positive ratings, where Pawn Stars was equally liked, but mostly disliked across the ideological spectrum. So the Lear Center says that Pawn Stars is the most hate-watched show in America, which is a unique distinction, I must say. They also have been doing this survey for a decade, so it's not static. So there were 2 shows that in the span of a decade went from very red skewed to very blue skewed, Saturday Night Live and The Tonight Show. Tonight Show obviously had changed hosts from 2008 to 2018. But then Saturday Night Live, my guess is it's probably having to do with impressions and who's being made of poked fun at on the political spectrum as well. So the lessons that I would say in this, and you may not do DRTV and you're like, why is Nick talking about this? This isn't just true for TV, it's the same for all sorts of media that you're buying across. You want to make sure that you are meeting your audience wherever they are, and that what you're across from is consistent over time, because digital media can change over time as well. Channel isn't highly predictive, and even channels and shows can change over time. And so if you're doing DRTV, you want to make sure that your buyer's not looking at this static view of what media are, and same thing for digital media as well. Any questions on that or on any of our topics so far? Hearing none, a couple of do as I say, not as I do's from our friends at Facebook and the New York Times. So Facebook, the media company Signal, wanted to minutely target Facebook and Instagram users like many of us do in the digital side of things. The trick is that they wanted to show their work. And so the ads were specifically to show how minutely targeted you can be on Facebook. And so picking one of these at random, you got this ad because you're a K-pop loving chemical engineer, your location's in Berlin, you just had a new baby, you just moved, and you've been doing pregnancy exercises. And so this is the type of data that you can be targeted by Facebook, but they don't like when you say that. And so Facebook banned them rather quickly. So Signal then wrote a piece about it, talking about these are the ads that have just been banned from Facebook. So okay if you target by all of that stuff, not okay if you tell people you target by that stuff. Not surprising, but does show the remarkable capacity that we have to minutely target. And that's something that is going to spread throughout our media ecosystem. One of the reasons that we here at More have invested in data and invested in digital printing is more and more print is going to be a canvas on which data can paint. And so you can customize by the type of person receiving it beyond just RFM segments, but really get down to who the person is and why they're supporting you. So there are some really exciting developments in this where you can do non-creepy versions of this, where you're really addressing why someone's giving to you. But obviously, these examples were set up to intentionally be creepy. Then the New York Times ran a piece called Stopping the Manipulation Machines. And one of the big areas that they took aim at was the Amazon Prime unsubscribe process. The author called it a labyrinthian process that requires multiple screens and clicks. He called it a roach motel. You can check in, but you can't check out as easily. And so the author, Benzinger, who's on the editorial board at the New York Times, said Amazon is deterring people from canceling their Prime subscriptions with these confusing things, and you have to talk to a person. And so it's a roach motel. You check in, you don't check out. So they said, what if we looked at the New York Times subscription process? Very easy to sign up for the New York Times, but to unsubscribe, you have to do 3 clicks to get into your account. You click on Manage My Subscription. You click on Cancel My Subscription. Does that cancel your subscription? No, it does not. You have to begin a chat, or you have to give them a call. And I don't know about you, but talking to a person is so like February 2020. Do we even need to talk to people anymore? So then once you begin the chat, you have to say, I want to cancel. And then they will repeatedly say, here's what you're paying. Here's what you get for it. We'd like you to sign up. And the last one says, please think about it. This offer might not be available when you come back. And so the same dark patterns that the New York Times is talking about Amazon Prime using and decrying in its opinion section are what it's doing on the other section. And you may remember that we talked about people being more likely to sign up for monthly subscriptions, including donations, if they know they're going to be able to subscribe easily. So this is not the type of experience we want to be delivering for our donors, which is why I highlighted here. The ever popular potpourri section. The budget proposed by the White House, Chronicle of Philanthropy did a piece that analyzed what it means for nonprofits. There's an increase in the capital gains tax and some rejiggering on how they figure estate taxes, which means that there may be a stronger incentive for those who are making out their wills to donate property or stock, and maybe an increase in planned giving. So that could be a boon to us. There's an increase in domestic spending. So those organizations that are providing services under a government contract. I know I've been on the board with back when I was in Texas, a local autism therapy organization. Both of my kids have autism. So when I was on the board there, so many of the services there were required to be provided as an educational supplements by the state. And so increase in domestic spending goes from federal government to state to organizations like that, charter to give community services. There was worry that there were going to be limitations on the amount that you could itemize in terms of charitable deductions, and there was no limit proposed on that. So that's a good thing for us on the charity side. On the negative side, we keep fighting for this above the line, sorry about that, charitable deduction, and that was not included in the proposed budget. So we're going to keep fighting for that. Those who remember a couple of months ago, we talked about how there was a $300 above the line deduction that people could get, and not coincidentally, an increase in the number of $300 gifts made at the end of the year. So you can see, draw the line pretty clearly between government tax policy, donations to your favorite nonprofit. And then finally, I always like to get a little nonsense in here, but this is nonprofits at work. So the Krakow Animal Welfare Society got calls from residents in Poland where they were warned people aren't coming out of their houses. They don't want to open their window because this creature that's up in the tree is going to attack them. Another caller called in and said, this is an iguana that's up in the tree. Can you please help remove it? So the terrorized residents are waiting in their homes because there might be this predator up in the tree. This is a croissant up in the tree. And once I say that, you can probably see it. So the Krakow Animal Welfare Society went into the tree, removed the croissant, they subdued it. And so yet another example of nonprofits to the rescue.